It was a Campos clean sweep in Monaco as the Spanish team won both Formula 2 races on the famous streets. It was another enthralling weekend of action in the F2 Championship. So, from the track to your headphones, welcome to another round of the F2 show. I'm your host, Aaron Harper, and joining me today are Formula 2 journalists Martin Lloyd and Jacob Orcock. Martin, coming to you first. Welcome back. Haven't seen you on the show for a little while. Did Monaco live up to your expectations?
Yeah, thank you very much for having me back. Uni's done now, so I can return to what I actually love doing. Um, yeah, it's been a really good weekend, oddly, for Monaco. I thought qualifying was fantastic, as you would expect. I thought it was really dramatic, particularly Rafa Kamara. I thought the sprint race, okay, you're not expecting much there, but I thought the feature race, towards the end, that strategic battle that you sometimes get at Monaco, sometimes don't, I thought it was really interesting. So yeah, really enjoyed.
Excellent. And obviously, you and I, Martin, were watching it from our TV screens at home. But Jacob, you were actually in the paddock in Monte Carlo this weekend. You have 60 seconds to make everyone incredibly jealous. Tell us all about it.
So he's making
Yeah,
everyone jealous. I'm already jealous.
yeah, I'm not sure 60 seconds is long enough. No, it was amazing. Great to be there to speak to everyone. Yeah, it was good. Right down by the sea, so lovely view from the media center. And yeah, everyone was clearly buzzing to be at Monaco again. So no, really good weekend, really positive. And I think seeing, even though he did mess up the feature race, I think watching Rafa in qualifying was really quite incredible, seeing him do that one lap wonder.
Yeah, it absolutely was. We'll talk about Rafael Kamara in today's episode. He had an eventful weekend, let's put it that way. So, what's coming up? Lots to get through. Nikola Tsolov obviously got back to winning ways, winning his second feature race of the year. We'll talk about his title momentum. Alex Dunn is starting to put some big points on the board after another second place finish. We'll talk about his progress so far this season. There were some ups and downs for Dino Beganovic, Gabriele Mini, and Rafael Kamara this weekend. We'll discuss their weekends in the Principality. Noel Leon won the sprint on Saturday. We'll discuss another excellent drive from the Mexican. And we're going to dissect another disastrous weekend for Trident. So let's start at the end of the weekend, Martin, with the feature race and another Monaco win for Nikola Tsolov to add to his Formula 3 successes. After 3 races without a point, he came into this weekend needing to score big. He got a point in the sprint race. How badly did he need to win on Sunday, though?
I think he certainly needed to win, but I think more than that, he needed to get a decent haul of points to return back to that top level of the standings that he was previously at, and to bring back a bit of momentum. But to win was quite something. It continues a quite extraordinary record where either Tsolov has won a race this year, or he's not finishing the points, or he's retired. There is no race where he's finished 5th, 6th, 4th. So often we talk about these being the drivers that are actually at the front of the championship. Well, actually, this is the guy that's just winning sometimes, and he's 1 point off the top. It's quite the record. He's the fastest driver to have got to three wins in a season since Felipe Drogovic 4 years ago. And I just thought his pace this weekend was so impressive. It reminds me a little bit, pace-wise, not actually in terms of racecraft, but in terms of pace, of Alex Dunn last year in his debut season. Now, Alex Dunn this year is clearly extremely quick as well, but last year there was a real starkness in his level of pace that he had, in terms of that quality was just something that not many other drivers, if any, had in the field. And that's what I see from Tsolov. He's always competing at the front. When he is competing at the front, he looks incredibly hard to beat. So I thought it was a very impressive drive from him. Especially, I know Kamara was the one that made the mistake, but Tsolov is the one that closes the 13-second gap in one lap and makes the mistake happen by drawing alongside, and then has the reactions to when Kamara pulls off into the escape road. Tsolov doesn't follow him. Tsolov doesn't turn into him. Tsolov brakes, makes sure he's gone, and turns right into the corner. That kind of heads-up driving is the sort of stuff that is going to win you races at such a high level as this. And I think it was a really, really impressive drive from the Bulgarian.
I must say, I was I won't say surprised, but I was completely expecting them both to go sliding off the track, considering that Tsolov
Completely,
was, because Tsolov was on the outside. That's always a difficult place to put yourself, especially if you're battling a driver who's going to be defending for his life and scrambling around for grip.
Ask Victor Martins.
Yeah, exactly. It was a very, very good bit of driving from Nikola Tsolov. So well done to him for that. He reaped the rewards. Jacob, Campos and Tsolov have been really strong, basically everywhere this season so far, which really bodes well for them. I think they're, I say Rodin are probably the team to beat in terms of the outright pace they've shown across all of the rounds so far. But Campos are absolutely up there, and they've shown since the beginning of using this generation of F2 car that they've got a very good handle on it. They're really set well for a tilt at both titles this season, aren't they?
No, absolutely. I think I agree with you in the sense that Rodin are the team to beat in terms of outright pace, but I think Campos are right there, and I think Tsolov, I would say, is a lot quicker than Noel at the moment, but Noel is definitely getting there and getting to grips with F2, and I think once he kind of is at the same level as Tsolov, because I do believe they're both very, very quick. I think once they kind of reach the same heights together, they will be the team to beat, because I think combined they will have more outright pace than Rodin. And one thing I want to pick up on that Martin said, Nikola knowing kind of his maturity in that sense, in that he would have been aware when Rafa came out that there was a pretty hefty gap. So to reach the end of the lap and all of a sudden be right up his gearbox, most drivers would just go for the move straight away, but he waited, he was sensible, and like you said, he didn't turn in, he waited for Rafa to make the mistake. So the maturity in that sense to force the mistake.
And the personal development in that sense as well over the last couple of years.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the incident that comes to mind for me is back in F3 when he had his incident with Alex Dunn. Now, we won't mention that, but I think the maturity there and the growth really shows signs to me of a future champion.
It was a really good drive, and I feel like Tsolov is actually having the season that Arvid Lindblad was supposed to have in Formula 2 last season. He came in and Red Bull were hoping that he would be challenging at the front, winning the races. He did win in Spain, which is obviously where we go to next, but that championship challenge never really materialized. And obviously he was with the Campos team off the back of a very good 2024 for the Spanish team. I think last year they had a bit of a dip. I think this year they're right back on it. And as you've both mentioned, Nikola Tsolov kind of inherited the victory, capitalizing on that mistake from Invicta's Rafa Kamara. It was really shocking, Martin, to see just how much the Brazilian was struggling on those tyres. I mean, they were all having a really difficult time, but he seemed to have a trickier time than most.
Yeah, it was quite something, and it was a bit of a shock as well, because most of the drivers, I hope I got it the right way around here, most of the drivers started on the soft tyre and switched to the super soft, and you would have thought the super soft is going to be relatively easy to warm up. It seemed like a relatively hot day. I don't know, Jacob. It seemed like there shouldn't have been any obvious issues that would make it so much harder than usual. I guess just the lack of high-speed corners meant that it was very, very difficult to really get any kind of meaningful temperature into those tyres. There's no real break between corners before you get until just before the Nouveau chicane, and that doesn't really count. So there's no space to weave as you would do in Barcelona next week. Say it was a real surprise. I think that the way Rafa lost that, or the way Rafa didn't have that temperature and was just unable to regain it, and you could almost see the way he was driving in that he was really struggling to hold onto the car, being very cautious, and then as soon as he gets into the battle with Tsolov, not that you knew he was going to lock up, but you thought there's a decent possibility he gets either the braking point wrong, goes straight on, brakes way too early, because as a driver in that situation, what do? You've got no sense of what a reference would be. The tyres are still really cold, and you've got a driver on your left. It's an incredibly difficult scenario. I felt a little sorry for Invicta. Clearly, it's their mistake to either whether it's a setup thing, whether it's a strategy thing, to have that. And of course, that was part of what lost Kamara the race. But I felt that the extent to which those tyres were difficult to warm up really could not have been predicted. It was really quite something.
It was interesting. Obviously, you're just sort of talking about the layout of the circuit there, saying there's no space to weave, and I think it didn't look particularly warm at that point of the day, because remember they're racing quite early in the morning. It's like 9:30
Indeed, yeah.
race start. So it hasn't had time to warm up yet, and obviously they're right by the sea. So if you've been by the coast, it can be quite chilly in the morning. So there's that lack of air temperature, lack of tire temperature because they don't have tire blankets. Then they're going up a hill, and it's basically a stretch. So they just lose all their tire temperature. It was, I mean, to be fair to all the drivers, the fact that none of them crashed on those tires is testament to their ability behind the wheel to manage to get these cars round. And Alex Dunn described it after the race as like driving on ice, and that's incredible, because he just seeing these cars with no grip. It's sometimes painful to watch, and we saw with Kush Miney at the end of the race as well, where he was drifting at points. It was incredible car control, but obviously behind the wheel, it must be enormously frustrating. And Jacob, I mentioned Alex Dunn there. Another podium for him. He and Rodin are kind of getting their act together and having those cleaner weekends, and he's really building some championship momentum now, isn't he?
Oh, absolutely. I think Alex is really beginning to find his feet. I think the start of last year he was very, very impressive, but then kind of tapered off at the end, and was kind of fighting towards the rear. But I think now, coming into his second season, he knows what to expect. He has that second year experience, and that really showed in Monaco, I think. Just kind of controlling his pace, knowing where to place the car, what to do, and kind of how to manage it. I was really impressed with him, and I think he was frustrated after qualifying. I think he knew there was a bit more time in the car, but I think if he'd had a stronger qualifying, he could have very easily driven off into the distance.
I mean, it's interesting you mentioned there about his experience. He actually mentioned in the press conference after the race about that sort of growth and understanding that he doesn't need to go all out for everything. And Martin, he basically said along the lines of, I'm not trying to win every race, which is a really odd thing to say. It's not quite that drastic. He's not focusing quite as much on going all out for pole position and winning the feature race. He's concentrating a bit more on bagging those solid points. He's got that understanding now that it's not just those race wins that are going to propel him to a championship. It's the seconds, thirds, or even fourth and fifth. And look at what Gabriele Mini has done so far. He's scored in every race bar one, and he leads the championship by a point. So I think that's a wise strategy, don't you?
Yeah, I do. I think it's an interesting one from his point of view. I think he's recognised that there needed to be a step change almost in mentality, and of course he wants to win every race, and we've very much seen that this season. But he's almost more comfortable with the idea of, okay, I'm going to pick up 10 less points than I'd have liked, but I've still got 15. Or the case that it was on Sunday, I've got 7 less than I'd like, but I've still got 18. I think it's really interesting from him, and it's almost like he's saying that he's almost like patting himself on the back and said, actually, this is what I've been wanting to achieve. This is where I've been wanting to get to. Is, of course, I'd like to win, but actually picking up those second places. He was very, very good last year and this year as well, actually, of picking up sprint race podiums, and that feature race composure seems to be there now. And you're talking about that consistency. There's one example actually on the current F2 grid that I'd like to highlight in terms of that. So if you look at the history of the last 4 rounds for Dino Beganovic, in the feature race in Melbourne, he started on pole, got an awful getaway, ended up only picking up the 2 points for pole position. In Montreal, he was running a second, I believe, and had a technical issue with 12 laps to go. So if you give him, say, conservatively for the Melbourne race, 15 points, say he finished third from pole, if you give him 12 points for Montreal, suddenly, give him 18 points for Montreal, suddenly you're looking at a driver who's got an extra 33 points. If I know it's big ifs, but if he hadn't had those failures, he would right now be on 76 points, 13 clear of Mini, without taking points away from Mini, where Bogdanovic scored more, etc. That just shows a driver who's not won a race this season exactly what Dunn's trying to do, exactly the level Dunn's trying to reach. I think Bogdanovic has probably been better at it than Dunn has this year, but you can absolutely see where Dunn is trying to get to, and the path that both he and Rodin and Stenchel, to an extent, the path that they're all on.
No, absolutely. It's
And can I just
so go on.
add? I think you look at him switching to Alpine now for this year for their academy. He wants an F1 drive at the end of this year. I think that's quite clear to see, and that's why he made the switch to Alpine. And he knows that maybe Franco will be under a bit of pressure. And I think he's got Paul Aron waiting in the wings. He's got Gabriele Mini leading the championship. He's got Kushmani as well, who's their reserve driver. He knows that there is a lot of competition at Alpine. And I mentioned this to him in the paddock, and he seemed to kind of play it down a bit. But I think it will definitely be in the back of his mind that if something happens to either Franco or Pierre next year, he knows that he will obviously be a leading candidate for that role. And I think if he is aware now that if he kind of bought his temperament, shall we say, from last year, where he was going for moves that necessarily weren't there, or kind of not managing the races as well, he knows that that would hamper his chances. But now coming into this year, he's realised, and it reminds me a bit of Fornaroli almost, where we know how long Leo went without a podium, or without a win, sorry. I think he knows now that it's not a case of winning every race, it's a case of that consistency to win the championship. And I think he knows that that stands him in the best chance for a F1 role next year.
No, you're both completely right. I mean, it doesn't take anything away from Alex Dunn. He's still an incredibly fast driver, and I'm sure that victory is only just around the corner. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if he turns up, sticks it on pole on Friday in Spain, and then goes off and wins the feature race by a few seconds, and it all looks very, very rosy for him. And you're right to say that he's trying to stand out amongst a lot of good competition for a potential Alpine seat in Formula One, potentially as early as next year. Martin mentioned Dino Bogdanovic, and he came third after a pretty hairy last lap with Kushmani, Jacob. That was a really important result for him because obviously, as Martin mentioned, he's had those two failures to finish where he picked up only the 2 points in Australia for pole position, but absolutely none at all in Canada. He really needed to bounce back, didn't he?
Yeah, he needs to pick up some momentum now. I think he definitely has the pace. He's got the car to win the championship this year. And coming into the European rounds, we know how crucial that momentum is going to be in terms of building a haul of points over the course of those races. And I think kind of from here to, I'd say, maybe Madrid will be very defining, not only in this championship, but also in drivers' careers, in terms of knowing how to build that momentum, knowing how to kind of get that string of results. And Canada, his confidence will have been knocked from Canada, even though it wasn't his fault. Retiring from a race is never ideal in that sense. But I think coming into here, getting those points, I think it could have been a lot more. I think he could have fought right up at the top two. But getting those points on the board to head into Barcelona, I think if you were to ask me for my prediction on who's going to win the feature race in Barcelona next weekend, I think it'll be him. Well, Freddie Slater will be in F1 next year, I'm saying. But I think it will be him. I think he has the pace. He's got that control and understanding. And yeah, I think he'll win it. Obviously, if I come on next weekend and he's won it, we've got to kind of clip this moment and bring it back, because that'll be an almighty prediction on my behalf.
That really will be. I mean, like you say, Bogdanovic has had really good pace this season, and he wasn't happy after qualifying. He admitted that himself. But I think he was kind of in the group of death, really, because he had himself, Alex Dunn, Rafa Kamara, and Gabriele Mini all in the same group. And I looked at that and I went, well, at least three of them are going to be unhappy. So yeah, it was just one of those things. It's the weird quirks of Monaco qualifying, because it's obviously split. So the further down you are in your group, the further rows back you are on the grid, which is it's a funky way of doing things. And now, talking of obviously the grid, they reverse it for Saturday and the sprint race, and it should have been Joshua Dirksen on pole position, but he impeded Krushmaini, which meant it was handed to Noel Leon, and he went on to win that race. It's his second consecutive sprint race victory, having won in Canada. Martin, it was another very impressive drive from the Mexican, wasn't it?
I think it was very assured, showed that composure that we've been talking about. I think the strategic element of Leon's win was the one that was the part that was most interesting. He really worked to make sure he had enough of a gap on the guys behind and was, not going to be under any danger into the back or the chicane or whatever. But he managed the race really impressively. Of course, it's easy to say, oh, in Monaco, if you start the sprint race on pole position, there's no pit stops. All you've got to do is keep it on the road. And while that's true to an extent, I think that the feature race, I know there was the tyre offset, but the feature race showed how actually, especially in Formula 2, where drivers are making mistakes and there's actually quite a lot going on outside of what you necessarily expect, it can change. And I think Noel Leon did a really good job from the start line to the checkered flag. Sure, I think he's going to have maybe more challenging races from which he starts on pole position in the future, but sprint win in Monaco, that's no bad thing.
No, absolutely. And Jacob mentioned earlier on that he feels that Noel is getting there in terms of equaling his sort of performance level with Nikola Tsolov. How long, Martin, do you think until we see that breakthrough feature race victory for the Mexican?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to take too long, and I'm going to go back to what Jacob said there. I think it might be next weekend. I think it's been a really, really interesting start to the season for Leon. I spoke to him in the big gap we had, and it was really interesting. We were talking a lot about how his family were coming to the rounds in North America, and I think obviously he was strong in Australia, but that perhaps even spurred him on even more. He's really connected to that Campos team. It really feels like a home for him in a way that Prema, in the way that team is, unfortunately, at the moment, really was a disastrous move for him after it was the sort of thing he dreamed of for his whole junior career. He seems to be in a really good spot. He seems to be working a great way with his team. And we mentioned it earlier, Campos have a history of being rather strong in Barcelona. Last year, if Pepe Marti had qualified in the top 5, top 6, I believe it would have probably been a Campos 1-2, such was their level. Lindblad really wasn't challenged that much for the victory at all. And when you look at how Campos were and how Lindblad was over the rest of the year, that's got to be seen as an anomaly. I would be very, very surprised. I know all the teams have got lots of knowledge, but that speed that Campos had last year, even with all the testing that everyone else has done, I'd be really surprised if they weren't right back up there again, especially in this form that both drivers are in. And on Leon, again, I agree with you, Jacob and Aaron, in that we've not seen everything that Noel Leon has had to offer. But the guy's 5th in the standings. He's only 3 points away from both Rodin drivers. He scored in every race but one. I think he's putting in a stellar job for someone who, as we're saying, might not have been showing all of his cards quite yet.
Now the performances in North America make sense. He's taken a trick out of the Lewis Hamilton playbook and bring your family along. It gives you an extra half a second in your pocket.
Extra boost.
Excellent, absolutely.
It's like if you're, I don't know, playing a concert or something when you're in school, and if you've got your mum in the audience or something, you're gonna have a much better time, right? Because you got someone to play to. It's surely the same principle.
Absolutely, it is. Now, talking of someone who has been so far playing a very, very good show, Gabriele Mini, but even though he remains our championship leader, Jacob, it's now just a point between himself and Nikola Tsolov. It was a bit of a mixed bag weekend for the Italian. Obviously, 3rd place in the sprint on Saturday, but it kind of all fell apart on Sunday. As soon as he entered the pit lane, he was one of the first of the top 10 to pit for the super soft tyre. Struggled to get it up to temperature. Actually got jumped by Emerson Fittipaldi in the AIX and Sebastian Montoya in the Prema, and he actually fell out of the points. So, sum up the Italians' weekend for us.
In the short term, pretty poor. I think it will really I think this weekend will be very defining for his whole season. Obviously, he still leads the championship, but it's by 1 point. And, I love Gabby. I think he's a great guy, but it's tricky to say. I think the sprint, he got what he needed. He got his podium. He got his points. But the feature race, it did, like you say, it did really kind of fall apart for him. And he fell out of the points. And knowing how Gabby is, he will be very kind of hard on himself and not be happy with that result. Now, heading into Barcelona, so one of two ways it will go. It will either be on his mind the whole time and he'll struggle to kind of bounce back from it, or he'll go into it and absolutely blow out of the park and get that haul of points. But I think, this weekend wasn't the best for him. He knows that. He knows qualifying wasn't his best, where it has previously been his strength. He knows, but it wasn't his best. But it's how he kind of bounces back from it in Barcelona that I think will really be the making of him.
He mentioned after. Sorry, go on, Martin.
I agree with you in terms it was a tricky weekend for him, but I think it was, he did what he could in the sprint race, and I think being one of the first of the top guys to come in, in previous years you'd have thought all that, if they get the window right, if they find a spot without traffic, which of course there was there was a lot going on in the lower reach of the field, but if they could have found a spot without traffic and didn't have the slower stop, it might have been a good strategy. I can understand why they did it. I agree in that he'll be hard on himself. I just hope he doesn't cut himself up too much, because drivers have had much worse weekends where they've scored no points and it's been completely their fault. And I would argue, could he have qualified better? Absolutely. But it was not a disastrous weekend that would destroy all his confidence in his speed. I would hope not. But I agree with you, Jacob. I think he needs to bounce back next week, especially in terms of momentum, because it's the start of a very intense confidence-based period.
I mean, up to that point, Mini had scored in every single race so far this season, even though he was last in both races at the start in Australia. So the speed is clearly there. I don't think the MP Mini combination has been sort of broken open yet, and we're not seeing everything that it's got to offer. A little bit like Noel Leon, we're not seeing 10 out of 10 in terms of what they've got, but I don't think they're far away. And Mini said after the sprint race on Saturday that it was all about maximizing what he had and taking home as many points as possible. So if you could only achieve a fifth place, finish in fifth. If you could finish first, make sure you finish first. And I think that's by and large what he's done so far this season. He needs to make sure, obviously, that Sunday is the anomaly and the rest of the season is more what he is doing on the regular. Now, talking of a team that had a really, really tough weekend, Trident. Now, I had really high hopes for the Italian team this weekend. I feel like they took a real big step forward in terms of their pace in Canada. It just didn't come together. Obviously, Lawrence Van Hoopen crashing out whilst leading in the feature race. John Bennett eliminated from both races that weekend. One mostly not through any fault of his own, the other a collision in the pit lane. But Martin, this weekend, it went down the toilet on Friday, didn't it? It was really, really hard to watch because you had Bennett in the wall and had his best lap deleted, and then you had Lawrence Van Hoopen bumped into a spin by Kush Miney, who got a 3-place grid penalty for that. But then Van Hoopen, instead of doing the old flick spin and lighting up the rear tyres, he was a little bit too sort of gentle with it and ended up getting stuck on a curb. And that was his session done before he'd done a lap. It's a really tough moment for the Italian team, isn't it?
Yeah, it was a really difficult weekend for Trident, and it's disappointing in, as you say, the context of how they started the season so strongly, especially with Lawrence Van Hoopen. I was watching it on Friday and I almost couldn't really believe what I was seeing because it was such a bang bang. Bennett's in the wall and he's lost his best lap, which I think he was in 4th place at the time. He wasn't doing too badly. And then in the next group of qualifying, Lawrence has that issue with Kushmini and he's out as well. And when you're at any other circuit, you think, okay, we're starting at the back. It's going to be difficult for us, but we know we've got pace. We'll go on the alternate strategy and maybe there'll be some safety cars and incidents that can throw us up. But at Monaco, you're asking for a lot. You're asking for, so much to go your way to even get a sniff of 1 or 2 points. And it starts to look really difficult. I think if you talk to Trident today, as in the day after the race, if it drops on Tuesday, Wednesday, they'll be disappointed. But Wednesday afternoon to Thursday, their full focus is going to go on Barcelona because I'd like to hope that they know, in comparison to where they were last year, they are in so much of a better position. They've clearly made such a big step forward with that car. Last year, they got 2 points total. And Lawrence Van Hoopen, of course, this year has already got 33 points. So you can't... I don't want to take this weekend and, of course, Canada as well, where Lawrence was in the wall. I don't want to take the weekend and say it's all awful for Trident, because I think I really would love them to hang on to that positivity, because it's been such a feel-good story, I'd say, of F2 this year, in terms of how one of these teams, and also AOX to an extent, of, I think, scored more points than we thought they would. How these teams have come up and they're really challenging in the midfield in a way that perhaps they hadn't as much previously, or drivers doing that as well, such as Kian Shields. But yeah, it's got to have been a tough one to swallow, especially when you've got 2 days more of pain to come.
No, absolutely. It is kind of wrote the weekend off for Trident, barring absolute calamity for everybody else on Saturday or Sunday. But yeah, hopefully they bounce back. Now we are coming to the end of the show. Before we wrap up, both of you, I'd like to get a name from someone who we haven't mentioned yet. I'll go first. I'm going to shout out Kush Mining and ART for just going out on a wing and a prayer in the feature race and just doing 41 laps until they had to stop in the hope of a safety car that might plonk them on the podium. But for the tyre warm-up struggles, Kushmani would have finished 3rd, or even if he'd managed to stay on the track at the chicane, he might have been able to claim the position back from Dino Beganovic afterwards. Jacob, who would you like to give a sort of special mention to?
I'd say Prema as a whole. I'd say Sebastian Montoya and Mari Boyer. Montoya with his points in the feature race. But also at the same time, I think Mari as well. I think they're both... I think Prema as a whole is really getting back to where it used to be. I spoke to Seb after qualifying on Friday, and we were talking about it, and he said if he hadn't hit the wall, he would have been top 3. And then that completely changes his weekend as a whole. So I think Prema, obviously it's a period of transition, shall we say, for them. It's been a turbulent period for them, and I don't think anyone can expect them to be winning championships at the moment, considering everything that's going on. But to kind of go through all those changes, to go through losing all that staff and getting new staff in, and to still have the pace that they showed this weekend, I think it looks very positive for them heading into Barcelona. I think if they use this kind of momentum, in a sense, from the feature race, I think they can have a really, really strong weekend from Barcelona. And like we spoke earlier, the momentum from this round and Barcelona, Austria, it can't be underestimated for the rest of the season.
Absolutely. Martin, who are you going to shout out?
I'd like to... Can I give 2? I'd like to give 2.
Go on then, I'll be jealous.
I'd like to give 1 to Roman Belinsky. 8 points, his highest finishing position in F2 in the sprint race, podium, 3rd place, and really starting to hopefully score the points that Dams would like. So he, as a partner of Beganovic, can start to help Dams to compete a little more in that team championship. And then Emma Fittipaldi as well, 6 more points for AIX after they picked up 14 in Canada. I think is a really impressive effort, and it shows that actually this team is not Dirksen racing as some people perhaps thought it might have been last year. They have actually made real steps forward, both with Emo Fittipaldi, who's a rookie come from Euro Cup 3, and Kian Shields, who struggled last year in F2 and struggled in F3 before. Both of those drivers are now really competing, and I think that's really, really positive to see, to have each of the teams, each of the drivers making that forward contribution to the championship and to the racing as well. So well done, Emo Fittipaldi and AIX.
Absolutely. It is very good for the championship to have 11 strong teams competing week in, week out. So let's turn our attention to the championship standings, starting with the drivers. Gabriele Mini remains on top, but just a single point clear of feature race winner Nikola Tsolov. Alex Dunn's podium moves him level on points with his Rodin teammate Martinez Stenson. They're 15 points behind Mini. Sprint race winner Noel Leon is now 5th, and Kushmani's 4th place moves him into the top 10. Rafael Villagomez and John Bennett are both yet to score points, but they've both shown they are more than capable of doing so. They just need to have a clean weekend, I think, and we'll see some points from them. In the team standings, Campos are our new leaders, unsurprisingly having won both races. They're 11 points clear of Rodin. Now, fun fact from this weekend, both of those teams scored 28 points in the feature race with the different combination of finishing positions for their drivers. MP Motorsport, who were our leaders, are bumped down to 3rd, while Invicta, the defending champions, will be brewing another weekend of dropped points. They're in 4th, and Dams are in 5th. Emerson Fittipaldi's 7th place in the feature race moves AIX into 10th, and Van Amersfoort Racing are propping up the standings. That is all for today. My thanks go to Martin and Jacob for joining me. We also want to hear from you in the comments. Tell us who your driver of the round was in Monaco. And make sure you hit the like button and subscribe so you stay up to speed with everything Formula 2. There's more content on our website, and you can join our Discord server, which is linked in the description below. There's not long to wait as the Formula 2 teams and drivers head to Barcelona in Spain this weekend for round 5. Arvid Lindblad took his maiden win there last year. Will we see another new winner this weekend? We'll have to wait and find out. From the track to your headphones, this has been the F2 Show.